Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I've been working as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 15 years, doing everything from creating simple HTML sites to managing a large retail chain's complete IT infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in 2020 when I was coding medium-sized custom websites was a vacation rental company. I'd heard plenty of warnings about not working with the guy who owned it, Jake. He had a reputation for being sharp as a tack, backstabbing, and conniving. He was a corporate lawyer, after all. So I went into the partnership with that in mind. Jake wanted a new website for his vacation rental business, where property owners would list their homes for rent, and renters would sign up and pay a subscription to access the listings. Jake would get a cut of everything. Nothing out of the ordinary there. We made a pretty good deal on paper, signed it, and I got started on the project. The initial coding in Python went well, but suddenly Jake demanded to see progress only a week into the project. He wanted to see the website front end now. "Look, Sarah," Jake said during our video call, "I need to see something tangible. How am I supposed to know you're actually working?" I tried explaining to him that the front-end work wasn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming and that I only had pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly stated this. "I don't care what the contract says," Jake snapped. "I'm the client, and I want to see a front end, now." He then got on his high horse and demanded that I put everything on hold to do the front end first. Design and then program. I, being relatively inexperienced at the time and fairly naive, agreed to this without asking for it to be added to the contract as an addendum and started working on the design. The contract stated that I was given free rein of the design decisions as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I made a quick draft in Figma and within 2 days I showed him. He wasn't impressed and demanded a different direction with a list of new requirements. "This isn't what I had in mind at all," Jake grumbled. "I need something more modern, sleek, and where's the search function?" I, as always, aimed to please the customer and did just what he wanted. I designed a new layout with his list of demands, but he didn't like that either. That's how the next 3 months went. A never-ending circle where he was never happy with anything. Now, close to 4 months into the project, Jake demanded to see a working showcase of the back end. "Sarah, I need to see the back end now. How's it coming along?" Jake asked during our weekly call. I pointed out that he himself had changed the order of the project and had demanded that I do the front-end design first, instead of the back-end as stated in the contract. Jake's tone turned cold. "Yes, the contract we both signed says you will have a working back-end to show me at the end of the month. If you don't honor that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism." Okay, I now had 12 days to do a back-end for the site, so I got a friend Tom to help me, and we worked tirelessly through a weekend. I had a good base to work from in 9 days. Mind you, at this point, Jake had only paid the security deposit on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and had shielded himself from paying by hiding behind, "Well, if you can't honor the contract, why should I? Finish XX work, and then I'll pay as per the contract." Remembering all the warnings I had heard about Jake, I decided to add a special function to the code just to be safe. More on that later. So now it was the end of the month. We had a front-end design Jake was okay with, a back-end that had been finished to about 85% of what was required according to the contract, and I still had 1 month left to finish everything else. Time for show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own dev server and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had 100 megabits upstream from the server, it might lag a little, but it wouldn't when it would be put on the production server he had his website on at his hosting company. "That's fine," Jake said, trying to hide his excitement. "Let's see what you've got." As I showed him the site, both front-end and back-end, I could see he was immensely happy with it, although he would never say so out loud. He was trying to hide his smile that popped up regularly, and his eyes gleamed with all the added ways he could now start making money. Anyway, he then said that it was way too slow, this was wrong, that was wrong, blah blah blah. "I want you to put it up on my production server and see how the speed is," Jake demanded. "Okay, no problem," I replied. "I can make that happen. Please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. I waited a few days and then got an email from Jake where he included a forwarded message from the bank detailing a transaction from him to me for the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I pushed the system to his production server so he could take a look at it, under beta.hisdomain.com. Then sent him an email stating that he could try the system with the supplied credentials. What Jake didn't know was that I knew he had been fishing around for another programmer to do this project, to pick up from a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right. So I knew he would most likely try to screw me. What I also suspected was that the email he sent me with the transaction proof was fake, which it ended up being. Pro Revenge 1. Remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was if user X, Jake's user, tried to remove user Y, my admin, from the system without one setting being changed in the config first, the system would first delete and purge the database and then remove all the documents in the web root. Well, not 5 minutes after he read the email from me, he did just that. He tried to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. Guess who had nothing of the project left? Jake did. Pro Revenge 2. Since it's considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities and Jake went under investigation by both the police and the bank's lawyers. Pro Revenge 3. I sold the system to a competitor of Jake's for a better price than originally contracted to him. Last I heard, he was now blacklisted from owning a company and he lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got that 5% he paid at the beginning, and for working for just over 5 months on this project, that was hardly anything. But the knowledge of Jake's downfall will keep my heart warm for the rest of my life. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd end up in a shouting match with a bunch of middle-aged busybodies on my own property, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at you. It all started when I inherited a house from my late uncle in a quiet suburban neighborhood. I was excited about the prospect of fixing it up and either selling it for a profit or renting it out. Little did I know I was stepping into a hornet's nest of homeowner association drama. The house had been empty for a few months after my uncle passed away, and I lived about an hour away, so I couldn't check on it daily. When I finally got around to visiting the property to assess what needed to be done, I was in for a rude awakening. As I pulled up to the driveway, I noticed a group of people standing on the front lawn, looking all huffy and important. I got out of my car, confused about why these strangers were on my property. "Excuse me," I called out. "Can I help you?" A woman with a severe bob haircut and an expression that could curdle milk stepped forward. "Are you the new owner?" she demanded, her voice dripping with disdain. I nodded, still bewildered. "Yeah, I inherited the place from my uncle. Who are you?" "We're the Homeowners Association Committee," she announced as if I should be impressed. "And we've got some serious issues to discuss with you." I blinked, trying to process this information. "Okay. But why are you on my property without permission?" The woman, who I later learned was named Karen, because of course she was, waved her hand dismissively. "That's not important right now. What's important is that you violated several homeowner association bylaws and we're here to inform you of the fines you've accrued." I felt my temper rising. "Fines? What fines? I haven't even touched the place yet." Karen pulled out a clipboard and began reading off a list of supposed violations. Overgrown lawn, peeling paint, unauthorized mailbox design, and failure to submit exterior modification plans for approval. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Hold on a second," I interrupted. "I'm not even part of your homeowner association. This house isn't in your community." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Don't be ridiculous. Every house in this neighborhood is part of the homeowner association." "No, it's not," I insisted. "My uncle never joined your association. This property is independent." The group started murmuring among themselves, clearly not used to someone challenging their authority. Karen's face turned an interesting shade of red. "That's impossible," she sputtered. "You must be mistaken." I stood my ground. "I'm not. I've got all the paperwork to prove it. Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd all leave my property." Instead of leaving, Karen huddled with her cronies, whispering furiously. I could feel my patience wearing thin. I had come here to start working on the house, not deal with this nonsense. "Look," I said, trying to remain calm, "I understand you have your rules for your community, but this house isn't part of it. I'm not paying any fines or making any changes based on your demands." That's when things really went off the rails. Karen whipped out her phone and started dialing. "If you won't comply, we'll have no choice but to call the authorities," she threatened. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you serious? You're calling the cops because I won't follow rules that don't apply to me? But Karen was already speaking into her phone, giving a dramatic account of how I was harassing the homeowner association committee and refusing to comply with neighborhood standards. I stood there dumbfounded as she hung up with a smug look on her face. "The police will be here shortly," she announced. "Maybe you'll be more cooperative with them." I knew I had to act fast. I rushed inside the house, thankful that I had brought all the relevant documents with me. I grabbed the property deed, my uncle's will, and other paperwork that clearly showed the house wasn't part of any homeowner association. When I came back outside, a police car was pulling up. Karen looked positively gleeful, probably thinking she was about to see me get hauled off in handcuffs. The officer, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, got out of his car and approached us. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, looking between me and the homeowner association group. Karen immediately launched into her version of events, painting me as some kind of lawless rebel, refusing to abide by community standards. I waited patiently for her to finish her tirade before speaking up. "Officer," I said calmly, "I'm the new owner of this property. I inherited it from my uncle, and it's not part of their homeowner association. They're trespassing on my land and threatening me with fines they have no authority to impose." The officer turned to me, his expression neutral. "Do you have any proof of this?" I handed over the documents I had retrieved from the house. "Here's the property deed, my uncle's will, and other paperwork. You'll see there's no mention of an homeowner association, and the property lines clearly show this house is outside their jurisdiction." The officer took a few minutes to review the documents while Karen and her group fidgeted nervously. Finally, he handed the papers back to me and turned to the homeowner association committee. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "it appears this property is indeed not part of your association. You have no authority here, and you're currently trespassing on private property." Karen's jaw dropped. But that's impossible. Every house in this area is part of our homeowner association." The officer shook his head. "Not this one. Now I'm gonna have to ask you all to leave the premises immediately." Karen looked like she was about to explode. "This is outrageous. We'll take this to court." "You're welcome to try," I said, feeling a surge of confidence. "But you'll be wasting your time and money. Now please get off my property before I press charges for trespassing." The homeowner association group slowly began to disperse, shooting me dirty looks as they left. Karen was the last to go, pausing at the edge of the driveway to deliver one final threat. "This isn't over," she hissed. "We'll make your life miserable." I turned to the officer. "Did you hear that? She just threatened me." The officer nodded, looking tired. "Ma'am, I'd advise you to cease all contact with this property owner and stick to managing the properties actually in your homeowner association. Any further harassment could result in legal action against you." With a final huff, Karen stormed off, leaving me alone with the officer. He gave me an apologetic smile. "Sorry about all this," he said. "We get a lot of homeowner association disputes, but this is a new one. You might want to consider putting up some no trespassing signs to prevent future incidents." I thanked him for his help and he left. As I stood there on my new property, I realized this was probably just the beginning of my troubles with the homeowner association. But I was determined not to let them bully me. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into renovating the house. I made sure to do everything by the book, getting all the necessary permits and following local regulations. I also put up those no trespassing signs the officer suggested, along with a few security cameras for good measure. The homeowner association didn't give up easily, though. They tried leaving threatening letters in my mailbox, which I reported to the postal inspector, and I caught them a few times trying to measure my grass with a ruler. Each time, I calmly reminded them that they had no authority over my property and that their actions constituted harassment. Finally, after about a month of this back and forth, I decided to take more drastic action. I hired a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and homeowner association issues. We sent a cease and desist letter to the homeowner association, detailing all of their harassment and threatening legal action if they didn't stop. To my surprise and relief, it worked. The harassment stopped almost immediately. I later heard through the grapevine that Karen had been forced to step down as homeowner association president due to her actions towards me and other homeowners who had complained about her overzealous enforcement of rules. In the end, I finished renovating the house and decided to rent it out. I made sure to inform all potential tenants about the homeowner association situation and included a clause in the lease agreement stating that the property was not subject to any homeowner association rules. Looking back, I'm glad I stood my ground against the homeowner association. It would have been easier to give in to their demands, but that would have set a dangerous precedent. Sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even if it means going up against a group of determined, clipboard-wielding neighbors. As for Karen and her homeowner association cronies, I hope they learned a valuable lesson about respecting property rights and not assuming authority where they have none. But somehow I doubt it. There's always another battle to be fought in the world of suburban politics. The next one is a petty revenge story. I, 24F, was renting a room from a friend in his 26M 3BR house. He was looking for a third roommate to help with bills, and he moves in an 18-OF that he met and hooked up with once the week prior. She was awful. A pathological liar, thief, had disgusting habits, neglected her cat. I could go on. I was always cleaning up after her, especially in the kitchen. She'd make big meals, hardly touch them, and leave them in the pot she cooked them in either on the stovetop or in the fridge for days at a time. I was always reminding her to clean up, then eventually doing it for her because she'd be gone for days at a time. But this particular scenario pushed me over the edge. She had a week-old meal rotting uncovered in the fridge that I'd already been nagging her about, and I knew she was about to leave for a few days. I reminded her to take care of it before she left, and then I leave to work. Of course, when I get home, she's gone, but the mess is not. I started seeing red, dude. So I pick up the pot, all her dirty dishes, her full litter box, laundry, and I put it all over her bed and bedroom floor. It could not be in my sight any longer, and it smelled so fucking bad in her room by the time she returned. She never said a word, and I made the rest of her time living there miserable. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This is not my story, but my friend Adam's. Adam is a retired police officer, and this takes place in the mid-90s, back when Adam was a beat cop maybe a year or two into his service. At the time this story takes place, a firebug had targeted several businesses over the course of a 3-month period. The fires were put out, but they were getting bigger and bigger, causing thousands of dollars in damage. Everyone was on edge, and the police were patrolling the area every night to try and catch Mr. Firebug. On this particular night in the middle of February, Adam and his partner Rick drew the short stick and thus were assigned to patrol part of the area. While on patrol, he notices a classic Mercedes-Benz pulling up to a house and a familiar lady dressed in a thick fur coat steps out. He groans. It's the wife of a local business owner that every officer in this town have had the displeasure to ticket for various parking traffic violations. It would have been fine if she were a nice lady or something. But no, her 3 default sentences were, "Don't you know who I am? Where's your manager, supervisor?" And, "I'll have your job." Seriously, she was a Karen before Karens were even a thing. Rick points out to Adam that Karen had parked right by a fire hydrant. Par for the course. Adam gets ready and steps out of the squad car. "Good evening, Mrs. Entitled, ma'am," Adam said. "What are you doing here?" Karen bellowed. Adam guessed that's the Karen version of the word hello. "Working the beat. You do know you parked next to a fire hydrant?" "So?" Karen said. "I'm suggesting you move it before I write you a ticket. I'm not in the mood for extra paperwork tonight." "Listen, you need to leave my car alone or I'll have your job." With that, Karen storms off to the house, goes inside, and slams the door. Adam thought, "If you say so," and proceeded to check the outside of the car for any more violations, and wishing that being a bitch was a federal offense. As he's putting the ticket under the windshield wiper, the call everyone's been dreading comes on the radio. A fire alarm has been triggered. The address? Right across the street. Adam looks over at the building and can see a faint orange glow in the windows on the second floor. He reports the glow. He and Rick get ready in case Mr. Firebug decides to cross their path. Several officers arrive and set a perimeter around the building as the glow gets brighter and brighter. Unfortunately, by the time the fire department gets there, flashover happens and all the windows on the second floor get blown out. It was so hot that Adam felt sweat form on his face. The fire department need to get the hoses set up. But Karen's car is in the way. Using safety hammers, they break the windows and run the hoses through, getting everything set up in record time. During all of the chaos, Karen comes out and she sounds like a banshee that had swallowed an air raid siren. She runs over and tries unhooking the hose from the hydrant. "What are you doing? My car is ruined!" It took 2 officers to restrain her and bark at her to go inside and let everyone do their jobs. She actually listened and returned inside. Adam spent the rest of his shift helping with the fire and investigation. It was close to dawn when he returned to the station to finish up. All he wanted was to go home and crawl into bed. That's when his supervisor calls Rick and him over and reports that Karen reported several $1,000s worth of damage. Not only had her windows broken, but water had gotten in and froze because it was, again, the middle of February. The supervisor asked them what happened and they reported everything. Fortunately, the dashcam caught a recording of the event. The supervisor shook her head, laughed, and said, "Well, you had nothing to do with the car getting damaged, so I consider this closed." A few weeks later, they caught the firebug, a different business owner who was trying to commit insurance fraud. He figured that if several other buildings caught fire, nobody would think he was responsible for burning down his own business. Unfortunately, Karen never did seem to learn her lesson, so she was back to racking up tickets and being a thorn in the police's side. She did have to pay for the damages and the ticket Adam gave her. The next one is an entitled People's Story. The fact that this was predicted so well by so many people here is kind of frightening, but it only seems to prove what a big stereotype wifey is. After roughly a week of the silent treatment from her, wifey couldn't keep it up anymore and started love bombing. She even tried to make me dinner and get me drunk. I told her while she was cooking that I wouldn't touch anything she made. For one, she's a terrible cook, and secondly, I don't trust her not to put something in the food. She made overcooked hamburgers and I didn't touch them or the alcohol provided. I mean, the beer was already opened. She cried and said I was being mean by not eating her food, and I coldly said it was because I can't trust her anymore. She retorted that it wasn't like she'd cheated on me or anything. I said back that she may as well have cheated since her mother was always more important to her than me, the man she married. You can't keep a marriage by treating your spouse as secondary. Wifey changed the subject by breaking down crying again and begged that if I stopped the divorce, we could get the marriage counseling I'd wanted, and she'd never try to have her mother live with us. I told her it was far too late. She had her chance and blew it badly. She already made it very clear where she'll always stand. In the past 2 years, she made no effort to get better and only acted nicer in public. Why would I want to stay in that sort of toxic relationship? She had to answer truthfully for once, and admitted that she likely would have left me if I'd done the same stuff to her. But she still kept trying to convince me not to divorce, and that we could work it out. I had to just walk away and go into the office again. Wifey didn't stop, and even tried to initiate intimacy multiple times. She walked around the house in lingerie a lot, and even my favorite of wearing nothing but a lacy apron. She hasn't done that for me since our honeymoon, even when I asked. She tried touching me in places, running her fingers in my hair and getting on her knees to try to entice me. I didn't take her bait and stonewalled. She ended up gaslighting me with the "am I not good enough" line. I told her she used to be, but I just can't see her that way anymore. Wifey left me alone to hit the bottle hard after I said that, and she wound up puking in the kitchen. I wouldn't put it past her to try and baby trap or frame me at this point. I even lock the door when I sleep, and I've installed a hidden camera in the room. I want out of this house, but I can't leave yet until I can get into my new place. Wifey later doubled down while sobbing when nothing was working on me and begged again that I don't go through with the separation and divorce. But I've already found an apartment that'll be vacant sometime in early to mid-March. I've also notified all of the utilities of the change as well. Wifey's now freaking out even more because now she has to find an apartment for herself right away. I don't really care where she'll end up. I'm just happy I'll be free of this house soon. I've also made sure not to tell her where my upcoming apartment is located, and she's tried to get that info out of me 3 times already. As soon as my new apartment is ready, I'll start moving stuff in. I'll be taking the bed from the guest room when I go. I paid for it after all. And it'll be easier to move since it's a queen size, and what's in the master bedroom is a king. I'm a light sleeper. So having a comfortable bed is a must. My wife can have the bulk of the furniture. She can either leave it for the next tenant or she can sell it. I don't care anymore. The apartment I'll be moving into is a 1-bedroom. The previous tenant left it in a sorry state, so it needs some remodeling. But I picked that specific one because not only will the rent will be far cheaper than the house, I'll be much closer to my job. Like, I could walk or bike to work from there. And I just might. I haven't ridden a bike in years because I never could get wifey to. Yet another thing she's held me back from, so when I move out, one of the first things I'm gonna do is buy a bike. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.